What is up, guys? Rick McKackis here. Thank you so much for stopping by, and today we are going to be discussing a really interesting concept. I see this brought up consistently in comments on Twitter, etc., of people asking for exotic weapons to have the ability to equip mods, just like any other legendary gun within the game. However, if you really dive into this topic, it can be a lot more complicated and a lot more tricky than some people are giving it credit. Is this really a good idea? Or should Bungie continue staying the course and staying away from it? Well, let's get started. But just before we do, I do want to address a mistake I made in yesterday's video where we talked about the massive changes coming to Infusion and how that has really upset a huge portion of the community who feel like their hard work and their weapons are being kind of taken away. Now, in that, I did say that Bungie kind of sprung this on us, and these changes are arriving with Season of the Worthy. However, some astute viewers pointed out that that may not be the case after rereading the announcement a few times, which is not worded the best, let me just say. What I initially interpreted as Bungie saying we're testing some things, including shelving legendary values, and those are arriving later down the road. I think they're actually saying the whole thing is arriving later down the road. So I apologize for saying that. Obviously, they are giving us more time to prepare than I initially interpreted. With that being said, please, Bungie, come out with a definitive timeline for when this is arriving in Destiny 2, because it's such a big deal and it really impacts how people are playing the game and what they're going for. But on to today's topic. Now, interestingly, I was thinking about this topic not too long ago, and so I released a poll on Twitter: mods on exotic weapons, hell yeah or nah, that'd be OP. And over 5,000 people voted. The final results show overwhelmingly people want this feature. So it's not really something I believe Bungie should continue to ignore. In fact, it's so overwhelming, I think a lot of people are probably wondering, why is there anyone against this idea? How would this be overpowered or negative in any sort of way? Well, you do have to kind of break down the results of this change. So, firstly, if we're just looking at normal weapon mods like Backup Meg and Rampage Spec, certain exotics would definitely benefit from that. In fact, that's why you're seeing background gameplay of the Huckleberry. This has Rampage built in. In fact, it's a special version. It's the pre-nerf version of Rampage, so it really ramps up in damage. And if you could use Rampage Spec on the Huckleberry, that would be a big deal, actually, both in PvE and in PvP. That would substantially improve this weapon. And often the Huckleberry is an example used by people who are in favor of this change, saying, look, this is not an exotic that's seeing a ton of play, and this is specifically a weapon mod that would absolutely help this weapon out. It already has a catalyst, and it's still not seeing a ton of play. However, you do have to think about the possibility where this would create a rich get richer scenario, in the sense that, yeah, Backup Meg or Target Adjuster would be good on a variety of different weapons. Let's use the Sunshot Hand Cannon, for example. Actually a 150 archetype. Some people do enjoy using it in PvP, but it's not seeing a ton of play. Some of you may be thinking, well, if I could put Icarus Grip on my Sunshot, that I can have that in-air accuracy, it would be a lot better. And that's absolutely correct. People often look to these underused exotics and say, hey, if I could put these mods on this weapon, it would get better. And while that's absolutely true, you can also put Icarus Grip in this scenario on the Thorn. The Thorn is seeing a lot of play right now. There is no shortage of people rocking the Thorn in PvP. And so that's kind of the scenario I think a lot of people don't realize when they talk about mods, is that yes, it would help the underperforming guns, but it would help the super highly performing exotics just as much, if not more so. And so, would you see a meta shift if you had the ability to put on mods on exotic weapons? Would you see some of the underused exotics suddenly come into their own? Or would you just see the already most used exotics get even more powerful? right? That is definitely a negative consequence of doing that. And if you think of those examples, backup mag on the Lord of Wolves, which is causing a ton of problems, target adjuster to increase the aim assist on the chaperone shotgun, that could be disgusting. So there are definitely some issues involving, again, that rich get richer scenario. With that being said, there's also some issues involving certain exotics that would get impacted by certain mods more than your average legendary weapon. A great example of this is the Izanagi's Burden. We all know how that sniper rifle works. Hold reload, you load a super powerful, ×4 round into the weapon. But what if you could put on backup mag? And then instead of 4 rounds in a magazine, you could have 5 rounds. How the heck would that work? Would the gun still function? Would there be a honed edge ×5 if you did that? Or would it be ×4 and then after you shoot that you have a normal shot in the magazine? So because certain exotics have incredibly unique exotic perks that make them so different from your normal weapons, yeah, stuff like the Huckleberry, the Thorn, the Sunshot, you can really theorize what would happen if you put on certain mods because they're very similar to legendary weapons in their base function. Other weapons like, Symmetry, again, Izanagi's Burden, if you put on certain mods, you would have no idea how that would affect the weapon. So that's another problem. With all that being said, with the normal set of weapon mods, we have those challenges. But there's another set of weapon mods. With how the seasons are now being rolled out and the seasonal artifacts, we of course have new seasonal weapon mods. And this is something that absolutely needs to be looked at. This is something that doesn't have the same downsides as if the normal group of weapon mods was introduced to exotic weapons. Right now, scout rifles are supposed to be one of the featured weapon types of the season, and yet we don't actually see a ton of, exotic scout rifle usage because a lot of those mods that affect scout rifles, like the Breaker mod or the Unstoppable mod, you can't apply them to legendary weapons. In fact, let's actually take a look at the actual PvE usage of these legendary scout rifles. The first one is coming in at 21st place with the Symmetry. Remember, this is the brand new gun part of the battle pass that everyone who got this season has access to. In fact, even if you didn't get this season, you didn't buy it, you still have access to this as a free-to-play player for getting to level 35. Everyone has access to this, and it's down at the 21st place. That's not great. And if we go to the next most used PvE scout rifle, we get to the Polaris Lance. And the Polaris Lance is a pretty handy weapon. You're seeing background gameplay of it. It has an exotic catalyst that basically gives it Firefly. It can chain together shots almost infinitely against bosses and so on. It's a pretty handy little weapon. It comes in the season that's supposed to be featuring scout rifles at 48th place in terms of usage. That is super, super low. And it's very unfortunate because you do see people utilizing scout rifles in activities where there are barrier champions and they can put on especially the barrier breaking mods. And I do have to admit, for the unstoppable champions, scout rifles are one of the better gun types to utilize that mod as well this season. So if the Polaris Lance, for example, could have access to those two seasonal mods, you would definitely see an uptick in usage. Symmetry too, it's down at 21st place, but if it could use those mods, I bet you'd see a lot more people rocking that weapon. And because the seasonal mods are geared towards PvE activities, you wouldn't have the same issues as the overall mods with, again, stuff like the Chaperone with Target Adjuster and some disgusting combos that can make some already overpowered exotic weapons even more overpowered. You would just have more functional PvE exotics, and again, you would actually feel more of a vibe of a featured gun type. This whole featured gun type thing, aside from the discounted loader mods, so right now they have Enhanced Sniper Rifle Loader, that is kind of the main important mod of this entire season, one of the only seasonal mods I use personally, you don't see that huge emphasis on certain gun types like Bungie says they're trying to do. But I think allowing the exotics to take part, you would see a lot more of an emphasis on a certain gun type, because those exotics are the exemplars. They're like the best in slot for those gun types. The Polaris Lance, the Symmetry, these are often better than any other legendary scout rifle, so allow people to actually use those in seasons that are supposed to feature that gun type. So, seasonal mods, definitely. Bungie, get on that, introduce them, it would really help the game. And although for this video our focus has been on weapons, I think allowing armor to also have the capability to use seasonal mods would be nothing but beneficial as well, especially when creating builds. But in terms of overall mods, that is a big can of worms. It could potentially be done. There would have to be some balancing and adjustments made to potentially counteract certain ones. I think people are overlooking some of the problems with it, but make no mistake, it would certainly make a lot of exotic weapons more viable and certainly more interesting. And so guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, found this informative, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at @RickKackis. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.